Podcast. I am your host, basketball data nerd, Lucas McNelly. So we were so close to getting through the end of the season without losing like a whole slate of games to a snowstorm, but we didn't. The final day of the regular season looks like it's going to be mostly a washout. Everything's getting moved. Teams are moving up into today, which is Wednesday while I'm recording this, and teams are moving back into Friday. And there's a rumor of someone trying to move back into Saturday, which I don't know if they're going to be able to pull that off. And then there's like three or four teams that are just like, oh, we have like 4 games left to play in the final week. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, almost every year this happens where teams go, oh, we have way too many games left and there's not enough days. And how are we going to get all these games in? And then there's other teams that are like, yeah, we got 1 game this week because we've heard of snow and we're prepared. So, if you're one of those teams, just plan ahead a little bit. So anyway, it's complete chaos in the schedule and trying to keep track of it as best as possible. But it looks like we're going to have at least around here, we're getting early release for school tomorrow. And looks like tomorrow night's going to be a wash. So I figured it would be a perfect time to release this episode I recorded earlier in the week with Dave Albee, who is promoting his book on the Foxcroft championship run back 50 years ago. It's the 50th anniversary of the thing. And where's the book? Okay, here we go. It's the last one out of town. Turn out the lights. The story of the 1975 Foxcroft Academy basketball champions. It's their only championship. And they're doing a fun thing on Facebook where they go through the season as if it were 50 years ago. And that's been really fun to follow. So it's a fun conversation. We talk about a lot of different people and a lot of different cool stuff and the differences between back then and now. And there's a bunch of names come up that I'm sure you're going to recognize. So I think you're really going to enjoy it. I had a lot of fun talking to him. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Dave Albee. My guest today has covered World Series and Super Bowls and every major sporting event it seems like there is, but the most important one was a Maine high school basketball state championship game between Foxcroft and Madomic Valley. Dave Albee is here. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Lucas. Really appreciate it.
And he seems to have frozen.
I'm there.
You're here? All right. All right, there you are. Your video's moving now. Thanks for joining me.
Sure, my pleasure.
And so you have a new book that you're on here to promote. I'm going to bring it up here. It's the last one out of town, Turn Out the Lights, the story of the 1975 Foxcroft Academy basketball season. And so you went to Foxcroft Academy.
I went to Foxcroft Academy, graduated in 1972, and this team won the state championship, Class B, in 1975. And in 1973, December of 1973, I started covering the team for the local newspaper, the Piscataquis Observer. And that was a fluke to begin with because I was working in an A&P grocery store in Dover, Foxcroft. And the local sports editor for the Piscataquis Observer was a customer during the week. So she came in and I talked with her every week. And I said, are you going to the big game this coming week? Foxcroft had probably his best team in 20 years then, and they were opening up the season against Orono at Orono, and Orono was the defending state champions. So I said, are you going to the game? And she says, no, I don't know a lot about basketball. And for whatever reason, I said, well, would you like me to go instead? So I go to the basketball game on a Saturday night in Orono. I come home. I write out the game story longhand on Sunday. On Monday, I turn it into the local newspaper, the Piscataquis Observer. And on Tuesday, the publisher editor calls me up and offers me a full-time job to be a sports writer. So that's how my 35-year broadcast sports writing career started, with that sort of fluke thing happen. And they had a real good team that year. In fact, the team that Foxcroft had in 1973-74, they thought was better than the state championship team. They had a guy named Kevin Saunders on that team along with Kevin Nelson. And Kevin wound up going to Husson College and was a Hall of Famer at Husson College or Husson University. But the 75 team is just a amazing story. And, I decided to do a book on it based on a conversation I had with a classmate of mine in 2022. I came back from my 50th high school reunion, and a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in like 48 years, his name's Dwayne Warren. And he was being inducted into the Foxcroft Academy Athletics Hall of Fame and asked me if I would write the profile for him for the introduction. And he had known I had been a sports writer, so I wrote it and sent it to him. And he goes, "Dave, why haven't you written a book?" And I said, "Well, I haven't really thought about it that much." And then he's in Connecticut, and I'm in California. We're going back and forth for about 2 weeks on the phone every night. He's calling me at midnight in Connecticut at 9 o'clock out here. And we're talking till he's talking to 1 o'clock in the morning. And then we sort of settled on the 75 team. And they had won the state championship. It's the only basketball state championship Foxcroft Academy has won in its 200-year history.
Wow.
They've only been back to the Eastern Maine championship twice since then, so they haven't really come close. But they struck lightning in a bottle, or as Kevin Nelson said, sort of this meteor landed in Dover Foxcroft in 1975. So it was just a wild. This started in November of 2022 when I started doing the first interviews, and here we are. The book's ready to come out, and really anxious for people to read it. It's an interesting book and an interesting time.
So your sports writing career essentially started because the editor of the newspaper said, well, we can't not have a sports person who knows anything about basketball, like we'll get run out of town.
Well, apparently he must have recognized some. I've always been passionate about sports. I actually went to a sports broadcasting school in Boston. I wanted to be the next Johnny Most. Boy, that really
Sure.
worked out well. And I
Not a
ended up.
lot of those jobs.
No, there's not. So like I said, just to pay off my college debt, I came back to the thing, and just one thing led to another, and it fluked, and I wound up as a sports writer. And this gentleman, Jim Thompson, who's still alive, still lives up in Calais, Maine, basically recognized some talent in me and offered me a job and told me he would help me with taking photos and doing darkroom work and doing general assignment reporting. So that's how my broadcasting or my newspaper career started.
So what was it like writing for a newspaper back then? Because now, it's all digital and we've got podcasts and they're, taking YouTube videos on the sidelines, and
Yeah,
it's like a completely different beast.
yeah, Lucas, we're talking about a way different period of time. I mean, TikTok back then was the sound of the clock made, and Facebook was probably the list of posters of the most wanted criminals in the United States in the post office. That was Facebook. But there was no 3-point line.
Right?
There was no dunking allowed in that period of time.
There
No
isn't now either.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So it was just a different period of time, and this story about this team, Foxcroft Academy, you can't tell it without Monson Academy, and Monson at that time, and we're talking 60s and 70s, even before that. Monson Academy had a tremendous basketball tradition. Foxcroft never had a good basketball tradition, but Monson had a great one. And it turns out that the star upcoming player was Kevin Nelson. He was 5'11" as a fifth grader, and he's in Monson Academy Gymnasium watching the 1968 Monson Academy Class S state champions coming back from Portland, and he's thinking he's going to be the next big thing or going to lead Monson to multiple state championships at that level.
Sure.
And the next year they play one more year, and then the consolidation happens, and Monson Academy closes its doors, and they're bust from Monson to Dover Foxcroft, bypassing Guilford, not going to Greenville. And Kevin Nelson, who then was living in Southeast Monson with a population of about 50, he gets bust from Southeast Monson to Dover Foxcroft, back to Monson, back to Southeast Monson every day.
So they didn't have school choice. It wasn't like this school dissolved and they're all sort of scattered. Did they sort of all get
No, they
sent?
all. It was a vote that happened, and there was a presentation given that they had a vote between Dover, Foxcroft, Sebec, Charleston, and Monson about forming what they then called School Administrative District 68, SAD 68, and the closest Monson's vote was by far the closest. I think it was 71 to 58 in favor of the consolidation. Dover Foxcroft was unanimous in the consolidation, but only 72 people voted for it. I mean,
Jeez.
it divided the town in Monson. Monson had a great basketball tradition. They won the state championship in 68, and their last season of basketball was 69.
Wow.
And, and then the next year, 1970, they're all being bussed down to Dover Foxcroft.
So then they've got to integrate these two teams, one of which has
Yes.
a tradition of winning and one of which does not.
Correct. You are correct. And also, and again, I was a sophomore at Foxcroft at that time, and it's like all of a sudden we go to school our sophomore year, and it's all these students. We weren't aware of the consolidation. It was a news thing. I mean, as teenagers, you're self-centered. You're thinking about yourself. You're not
Yeah.
aware of that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, we've got an influx of 60, 70 students in our school, all from Monson type thing, and then you've got that, the Monson students really, even to this day, I think there was some resentment that they had to come to Foxcroft to go to school. I mean, they got their school was closed, and they had to each day they were picked up in a bus to be bused to Dover Foxcroft at the very site of where their school was, which was closed to them anymore. They locked the doors and didn't let them in anymore, so they
But
had to take the bus and go someplace.
I did like the quote, the
Go
one
ahead.
quote on your website where the one of the Monson players was like against it, and then someone pointed out to him that there were 50 girls as opposed to five at the new school, and he's like, "Well, that's not so bad."
Steve Bray said that. Steve was a, and I wish we had the photo. There's a photo of Steve as a freshman. He was a freshman, a 4'11" freshman on the 1968 Monson State Champions, and he wound up coming to Foxcroft and played at Foxcroft for 2 years. In fact, Steve's one of my best friends now. He was in my first wedding, so
Oh, there you go.
but that was one of the things he was talking about. He had in Monson Academy, they could go to the next room and they beat the next class. Where they go to Dover Foxcroft, it's a 3-story building, and he'd have to go, up 3 flights of stairs to get to the next class. So it was like a museum, I guess, for them. They're just so big for them to go from Monson Academy to Foxcroft Academy.
I mean, that must have been like a bit of a culture shock, if nothing else, and or at least intimidating.
Yeah, yeah, it was. And some of the players, and the other thing is Skip Hansen, who was the new basketball coach at Foxcroft. He came in my sophomore year also, and Skip came back to his hometown to coach the team. And anybody that has to go back to their hometown and coach is that's a tough thing to do. And he's integrating Dover Foxcroft students and Monson students on the basketball team. So he's not going to please a lot of people by who he picks on the team and this and that.
Hmm.
So there was his first couple of years, he made some really controversial cuts of the basketball team, keeping a couple of Monson guys on it and cutting some Dover guys, and that didn't set well. And the senior year when they won the state championship, they had 7 seniors on the team, and the 7 seniors on the team actually played together in 8th grade at Dover Grammar School. That's the first year that Kevin Nelson came down from Monson. They played at Dover Grammar, and so they all knew each other basically, but they all played in an undefeated team as 8th graders, and they got together again as undefeated, and were undefeated as seniors in high school.
How so that for skipping ahead to the seniors, the championship season, how early in the
Mm-hmm.
season did the team start to think, or the community start to think, okay, this is something. We've got a
Well,
shot.
I think they lost a really controversial game to Orono the previous year on a phantom foul, a foul that was
Oh,
called on Kevin Nelson,
okay,
fouled him
tell me
out of the
about the
game.
phantom foul, because you mentioned that like 6 times
Okay.
on the website, and
Yeah.
I love a good ref controversy.
So Foxcroft had like a 5-point lead with under 2 minutes to play in the Eastern Maine Championship game. So they were a couple of minutes and a comfortable lead from going to their first ever state championship game. And Tom Philbrick, who was Orono star, goes up for a shot, and a whistle blows, and it's a foul called on Kevin Nelson. And Kevin's 6'8", and that was his 5th foul of the game. So Kevin is fouled. So that Foxcroft loses its star player. He goes to the sideline, and Tom makes the free throws. Makes the free throw for a 3-point play, and then they score again. And Foxcroft doesn't score again, and Orono ends up winning the game. And everyone was always blaming the officials for the 5th
Of
foul.
course,
And I
but no
talked
one
to
rushed out on the floor.
no one rushed out on the floor. No, it
Well,
was
that's
it was
good.
calm. I mean, well, the fans were angry, but they didn't rush out on the floor like I heard some of the stories lately on fans.
Been a
But
week.
what happened was interesting about that is when the foul was called, Tom Philbrick from Orono went to the official. It was named Del Merrill, and he goes, "Deli, he didn't touch me." And of course, a
Ooh,
referee is going to make a call. He's not going to change his call.
no,
And
never.
Skip Hansen, Foxcroft call, heard Tommy Philbrick saying this, and he says, to this day, I hold Tom Philbrick in high esteem for admitting that he didn't get fouled on that play. And I talked in the research, I went back and talked to Tom. Tom is now running a lobster restaurant in Boothbay Harbor. Talked to Tom, and Tom admitted again. He says, no, I didn't foul him. And he said, and actually, years later, he told Kevin Saunders, who's on that Foxcroft team, that Foxcroft probably had a better chance of winning the state championship that year against Camden Rockport because they matched up better with Camden Rockport than Orono did. So anyway, there were three starters on the Foxcroft team that graduated from the team. So they had Kevin Nelson coming back and Jeff Tyne. So they had a really sort of inexperienced team with varsity. They didn't have a lot of experience coming back, but they had the best player in Maine. I mean, Kevin Nelson was the Cooper Flag of Maine at that point. And so they started a season. They beat Orono season opener. There was a benches clearing brawl in the very first game of Foxcroft. So that started our thing. But they handily beat Orono. And you got to remember there was a point, Lucas, at one point that Orono had beaten Foxcroft in boys basketball 34 out of 35 times.
Wow.
So Orono was the team they had to get over or get past to win a championship. So I think they sort of started. The team came together. They got by Orono. That was the big one, and then they kept winning and obviously kept going. I think probably around Christmas time is when people really got excited about it. I joke that there's at Dover Foxcroft in Dover Foxcroft the biggest attraction in Dover Foxcroft in the wintertime is the Santa and Rudolph display out on the front lawn of Foxcroft Academy. People go up to see that. But now they were having another reason for staying there because the basketball team was, for real, and they were packing it. There were sellout crowds every night for the games. So the town was getting excited. They beat Orono again the second time they play them, and Kevin Nelson goes for 47 points that game. A single season at that time, a single game record for Foxcroft, 47 points against Foxcroft. He was 21 or 26 in the game. I talked
with
to
no
Mike
3-point
Archer,
line.
With no 3-point line. I talked to Mike Archer, who's the AD at Orono, and I told him that story. And John Giffen was the coach for Orono at that time, and he was very much a defensive specialist. But for whatever reason, they didn't try to double team Kevin Nelson that night. So pretty much he was on his own. And I talked to Mike Archer, and he said, well, they should have gone box and one that night on Kevin Nelson and put the 4 on Kevin Nelson to prevent him from getting the 47 points.
Yeah.
So anyways, so when they beat Orono, I think that told the team and told the town and their fans that, okay, they've got something special going. They're going to run the table. They're going to be undefeated going to the tournament. So here comes the story about the title of the book is when Foxcroft went to the quarterfinals that year. They had to go up Route 15, I think it is, from Dover Foxcroft to Bangor. It's the only road you go to Bangor.
Yeah.
And there's a gentleman in the town by the name of Neil Johnston. He's quite a character. He was a custodian at the junior high school and one of the elementary school, but he was known as a character and did pranks and this and that. Well, he decided that he would build a sign, and the plywood sign, he and Ted Harvey, his partner in crime, decided to build the sign. Yeah, and you say it's probably about, I'm guessing that's probably 6 to 8 by 12, and they put this in a snowbank on the outside of town on the way to Bangor. And they put this up on that Thursday morning or Wednesday. So the team saw it as they were going to Bangor, as did the fans, as did the band. So when I did the research on the book, I must have talked to 60 to 70 people, and everybody I talked about mentioned that sign. They all remember that sign. So that sort of became to me the obvious title for the book, although it was probably, not very good in terms of selling books and squeezing so many words on one book cover. But that was the obvious title of the book to me, and that sort of encapsulated the community spirit and the obsession with that basketball team going to the tournament. And again, they play Orono for a third time in the state champion in the Eastern Maine Championship, and beat them for a third time and go to the state championship game against Madomic, which was another story because no one knew anything about Madomic.
Yeah, and that was the heyday of Madomic. That was
exactly,
the Art Dyer Madomic teams.
Yeah, and Madomic had a tremendous basketball tradition, and they've been on the cusp of winning a state championship. And Camden Rockport always got in the way, and then they played Camden Rockport in the
Bastards.
quarterfinals that year and beat them. Yeah, but they played Camden Rockport, the defending state championships. Madomic plays them in the quarterfinals and beats them by 40 points.
I love it.
And so Madomic just cruises through the Western Maine tournament. They averaged 90 points a game, and they were blowing people away. They beat Mexico in the finals. Al Barron goes for 36 points. But again, we go back to this period of time. There's nothing. No one knew anything about anybody because there's
Right.
there's nothing online. There's no YouTube. The only thing you know about a opposing team is essentially what you see in a box score,
Hmm.
or what you hear on TV. That's it.
Yeah.
To Foxcroft, McDomick was this methodical team with this methodical giant player in Al Barron, and they had a front line. Then I think Al Barron was 6'6", and they went 6'6", 6'4", 6'4", which is huge at that time period, that big a team. So Foxcroft
That's
was
what
sort of
they've got this
intimidated.
year too.
Yeah, so Foxcroft was sort of intimidated by that, and Foxcroft again was always focused on beating Orono. So all of a sudden, it's like, oh, we play Madomic Valley. What do we know about them? And they really didn't know much. The story that was told in the book is that Skip Hansen and his two assistant coaches, Dennis Kyer and Dave Clement, took Monday off and drove down to Augusta and went to Coney High School. And they met a gentleman down there. And I can't think of his name off the top of my head right now, but he was a basketball referee who had refereed some of Madomic Valley's games.
Okay.
And there was a connection. Skip Chappelle knew this guy, and so there was some sort of connection. They said, let's go ask him. So they spent like 3 hours in Augusta talking to this guy, basically going over Madomic's strengths and weaknesses. And that was their scout. That's the only scouting report they had. They go back and they knew the Madomic Valley loved the press. They loved the
Hmm.
run and gun. And so they spent a lot of time during the week practicing on the full court press, Madomic, because Madomic Valley was a classic turn the ball over, run, score, fast paced. They're scoring 90 points a game, and that was their style of play. And Foxcroft was more of a deliberate, slow it down type team. So they were prepared for him. They were prepared for him, but again, you don't know. They had never laid eyes on him until they saw him in the warm-ups when they got to the Augusta Civic Center.
So they didn't even have like tape like back in the day when you would
No,
like hand off tapes at like the parking
exactly.
lot
Yeah,
of the gas station or
yeah.
something.
All they knew was what from what they could see in box scores and what they could see in a roster. That's all they knew about Madomic Valley.
That's just
And
crazy to think of. And now we've got
yeah,
like every game is streaming, and
if
so
you
we
want to
know
see
it.
a team, you go online, you Google something, you get a YouTube, or you got something you can see right in front of you. Not then. I mean, this game wasn't even on television either. That's another thing is we
Wait,
couldn't find any video
the,
at all.
the
It
tournament
was the
wasn't on
state
TV
champ.
then?
The tournament was on TV in Eastern Maine, I think Western Maine, but the state championship game was not on television. The
Wow.
class A game was in the Bangor Auditorium, but the class B game, which is we had two undefeated teams, was not
Hmm.
on TV. I went and tried to do some research on that, and the nearest I could come to a conclusion is they didn't have sponsorship to put it on TV because the year before, the Augusta Civic Center had been wired to be able to do a television broadcast, but there was no sponsorship and no demand. And again, those were two undefeated teams. They were both 22-0 going in. So,
And that blows my mind because I remember growing up when every game was on PBS,
mhm.
and on Main Public or whatever it was called then. And even now, when they took them off of PBS and went to streaming, there was a minor riot
Yeah,
because it
yeah,
was like this
well,
history of it's always been on TV.
yeah. And that's the thing
Huh.
is the only account we have of that game is whatever was the score books, and there were two radio broadcasts. There was Dover Foxcroft at a radio station WDME at the time, and John Spruce was the play-by-play announcer for Foxcroft, and it had his account of it. And then there was another main broadcasting network that had a radio account of that game, and you can find that online too. So I was able to listen to that, and plus, I did get sort of the play-by-play. Someone had written out the play-by-play of what happened in the game, and I had that available. And then you go through box scores and try to find that stuff, and it's a lot of digging 50 years later. That's for
Sure.
sure.
How different were the radio broadcasts? Were they like very homerish in each direction, or were they sort
No,
of
I thought they were
neutral?
very. They were very. No, I thought the main network one was very neutral, and
Hmm.
I thought the Foxcroft one, John Spruce was a very fair-minded guy, and I, obviously he's more excited about Foxcroft and Foxcroft winning, and I think his big cry at the end was "whoopee" when they won, type thing. That was his exclamation point type thing, but it was pretty even centered, I thought, on broadcast. It wasn't, screaming and yelling, but obviously you can tell from the WDME broadcast that they were very excited, and he's talking about what's going on the floor afterwards, and
Hmm.
people storming onto the court and that kind of thing. So it's cool.
So I'm just imagining if as I know how insane for basketball the Waldoboro area is and has been ever since then, like pretty much
Yeah.
nonstop. And so I'm just imagining that it must have been absolute madness at that game.
Yes, it was. In fact, one of the uh, at that point, and one of the chapters in the book is entitled "F.A. Band of Brothers." The Foxcroft Academy band had a better reputation than the Foxcroft Academy basketball team.
Yeah, I think that's
And
probably fair.
yeah, and I mean, when Foxcroft was fortunate to make the tournament, and generally when they made the tournament before Kevin Nelson came along, they would make it when they were seventh or eighth, and they ended up playing Skinka Orono, and always getting beat. And the band would go down there, and you'd read the Bangor Daily News the next day, and the Bangor Daily News sports writers were remarking more about the band and how great the band was as opposed to the basketball team. And oh, by the way, the basketball team lost,
There's
type
still
thing.
some of
And
that.
yeah, it's still some of that. And there's some great bands back there. And so the band goes down, and the band had a song called "The Horse." It's a song that was composed and played by a jazz band, Cliff Nobles and Group, in 1968. And Bob Thorne was the director at Foxcroft Academy, the band director, and he thought it was a catchy jazz tune. Plus, it was called "The Horse," and Foxcroft's nickname is the Ponies.
Sure.
So the FA band would play that before every game. And I remember I was at courtside for the state championship game, and pretty much, turn out the lights. The last one out of town, turn out the lights was sort of thing. There was probably, I think, the seating capacity, the Augusta Civic Center. There was probably, well, there was overflow. They were still putting seats in, folding seats in at halftime, but there was probably
Wow.
7,000, 8,000 people there. So there's at least
That's
three to
all right.
four
Yeah.
thousand, 3 to 4,000 Foxcroft fans there. And the band twice in the pregame was playing the song "The Horse." And it's one of these songs, it's a catchy song, and you clap along with it rhythmically type thing.
Hmm.
And they played it twice, and every Foxcroft fan was standing up right next to the band, clapping when the song was being played. And it was pretty intimidating. And in fact, I talked to Al Barron from Adomic Valley, and he was sort of taken back by the show of support from the Foxcroft fans and also from the band. And Al was also intimidated by the fact that Foxcroft showed up in a Greyhound bus that they chartered for the game, where McDomick
Oh,
showed up in
classy.
a yellow school bus. So Al saying that must be, he said, why can't we have a bus like that, type thing. So,
Yeah.
but McDomick did not have a very good game. Um, and a poor shooting night. Again, they averaged 90 points a game in the Western Main tournament, and they only scored 53 in the championship game. And they didn't shoot
Wow.
well. A couple of players had off nights. Dean Erickson, LaHaye, who had been tremendous in the Western Main tournament, had off shooting nights, and Kevin had his typical game. And then there was another player for Foxcroft that came off the bench named Peter Snow. And Peter didn't play 1 minute the previous week against Orono in a state championship game because Skip Hansen wanted his seniors on the court when they finally beat Orono. So Peter was upset that he didn't get to play against Orono in the Eastern Maine championship game. And for whatever reason, he had a good week of practice, and Skip put him in as a sixth man. He ends up scoring like 7 points with 3 rebounds, the biggest 7 points of his life.
Yeah.
And Al Barron described him as sort of the X factor in the game. I think Al described him as a torpedo coming out of water, is what he said, type thing. It sort of swayed the momentum with Peter there. So it's, and again, that was one of these decisions. Skip Hansen made a lot of decisions in his years at Foxcroft Academy, and a lot of head scratching decisions. But it seemed like every decision he made in pushing buttons made were good decisions and worked out right.
Tell the story real quick that you told me before we started recording about Al and being discovered at Moody's Diner, because it's just so quintessentially Maine to
Yeah,
me and Maine basketball.
it is. Well, Al came from Danbury, Connecticut. He transferred in his junior year in Madomic Valley. He's 6'6", so he and his family, they're looking for property or a place to buy in the Waldoboro area. So they stop into Moody's for something to eat at lunch or breakfast, whatever it was.
As the law
And
requires.
yeah, exactly. So a waitress noticed that Al was there, and he was a big guy, and she asked him if he played basketball, and he said yes. And then Al says, I noticed, a few minutes later, she's on the telephone and she's talking to somebody. And 10 minutes later, Art Dyer walks into the restaurant, walks into Moody's, and walks up to Al Barron and introduces himself. So obviously, she tipped off Al that there was a big basketball player at Moody's who was moving to town. So Art went on to recruiting binge, and he came down there. And actually, Al wound up living with Art Dyer for a little bit until the family got settled in Waldoboro. And I think at that time, Art was living in Friendship. I thought that was interesting that he ends up being the best friend for Al Barron and invites him to his home, Friendship. And that's how they got together. And Al was sort of the missing piece that Madomic thought it needed to get past Camden Rockport and other teams to win their state championship finally.
I mean, it takes a whole community to create a basketball program. And, if you're not on your toes, they're going to find farmland in Rockport or something, and he's going to go to Camden.
What's
And
that?
you can't have that.
No, I don't think. I don't know. The family was looking to live off the land. They sound like they were
Hmm.
very interested in leaving the city behind in Danbury and coming up to Maine and buying a farm and living off the land, and he winds up in Moody's Diner, and the rest is Madomic history. So
I will have you know that Moody's Diner has not changed at all. And if
good,
and if a six
good.
six high school kid who played basketball showed up at Moody's Diner, Nick DePatsy would be there in 10 minutes because he would have gotten a call from a waitress.
That's,
Like that
that's great.
has
Uh,
I washed dishes there for several summers in high school, and that has not changed a bit.
There's another story I'd like to tell you about Madomic Valley, where Foxcroft didn't know anything about Madomic Valley. Madomic Valley knew everything they needed to know about Foxcroft. And it began that summer. The Madomic team goes up to Thomas College to the basketball camp. I think it's called the Pine Tree Basketball Camp.
Hmm.
And Al Barron already knows we're going to go to state, and Foxcroft and Kevin Nelson are going to meet us in the state championship game. He already anticipated that. So Al, during the week of the basketball camp, is trying to arrange an impromptu scrimmage on one of the outside courts at Thomas College so that they can play and he can sort of measure the Madomic players against the Foxcroft players. And
Yeah,
they end up eventually, I think there was only three players from Foxcroft that were there. It was Kevin Nelson, Jeff Dunn, and Jeff Brown, who was normally the sixth man. And Madomic pretty much had its full team there, and they ended up having some sort of scrimmage, and Madomic handles Foxcroft there. So Al says he comes out of that summer basketball camp thinking, hey, pretty good team, but we're better than they are. Well, for good measure, one night, I'm guessing it was in January during the basketball season, Al and some Madomic players decide they're going to drive all the way from Waldoboro to Dover Foxcroft and scout Foxcroft in the game.
that's
Foxcroft's
a
playing
hike.
somebody on a Friday or Saturday night. Yeah, it's a long hike. It's like a 2-hour drive.
Yeah.
And so they get in two cars in Waldoboro. They drive all the way to Foxcroft. They're wearing the Madomic gear. They go sit in the visiting section at Foxcroft Academy. They're watching the game. And I think Al said, all I know is we got up there fast and we left there fast, but we left there with the same impression we had in the summertime. They're a good team, but we are decidedly better. We can beat them. And then Al says, that's a pretty bad attitude to have when you're 17 and 18 years old.
Yeah, it's
So it
risky.
came back to sort of haunt them. I think they came in overconfident based on their own judgment of it, but they had more information on Foxcroft than Foxcroft had on Madomic.
And maybe
So
that's
it's
not good in that situation because Foxcroft is just playing free
yeah,
and loose,
and
and they're like, well,
Al exactly, and Al Barron admitted so that we were overconfident, we were cocky and arrogant, and we thought we could beat anybody. And he was telling me a story where that year they started wearing gold wristbands, and the reason they
ooh,
started wearing gold wristbands was they went for a rebound, they would be able to see if there was another player up there with a gold wristband, they know it would be one of their teammates. So they'd let them
Huh.
get the rebound and back away from them. So it was a way of showing superiority and also, that felt that way. So he'd go up for rebounds and they were wearing gold wristbands so they could identify each other and to lay off rebounds. So, but they
Interesting.
hadn't played they hadn't come up against the guys of Kevin Nelson's height and stature that year. One of the ex players I talked to was Scott Graffam, and
Oh,
Scott was
sure.
at the game in
I know
'75.
Scott.
Yeah, and Scott had a blueprint, and the blueprint is in the book about how Madomic Valley was going to win the game, and this is how they could win it. And then I had heard a story. Someone had told me that Scott had claimed that Kevin Nelson blocked the shot of every single Madomic starter in the first quarter of the state championship game.
Hmm.
And I had not heard that. And when I saw Scott, I went to the Maine Basketball Hall of Fame when Scott was inducted, and I said, "Your story I heard is that he blocked the shot of an." He goes, "That's true. That's what I saw. And that's what I remember. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it." So, and it wasn't true. I don't think it was true anyways, because I think Kevin had I think 4 or 5 block shots for the game total.
But
But
still.
he was so intimidating. Yeah, he was so intimidating that, and then perhaps that contributed to Madomic's shooting woes that night. Al seems to think it's because they were shooting at freestanding baskets. Now, Foxcroft, when it played at that time when they were playing in the Eastern Maine tournament, they were playing in the Bangor Auditorium, and the Bangor Auditorium had freestanding baskets.
Oh.
When the Western Maine tournament that year was played, I believe at Edward Little High School, which had regular baskets.
Hmm.
They came down, so they were playing on that. They never. Al said that's the first time that we went to a game where we had freestanding baskets. So Foxcroft had some experience with that and the depth perception and all that.
Yep.
Madomic asked if they could have a shoot around in the gymnasium at the Augusta Civic Center that week, but he said the Maine Principals Association denied them the opportunity because they would have to afford Foxcroft the same opportunity, and Foxcroft was a
Right.
2-hour drive away. So it really didn't work out. So both teams, when they walked into the Augusta Civic Center that night, were on that court for the very first time. So there was really no advantage for either team there, but Foxcroft had some experience shooting at a freestanding basket.
See, now that's like a rule that they have to let you on the floor for like a
Yeah.
practice for the state game.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense.
So,
Shoot around. Yeah. That's what it is. So,
so what you're saying is I can blame the MPA for this.
well, they were just trying to be fair, is what they were trying to
Sure.
be. And again, Madomic Valley is 25-minute drive from the Augusta Civic Center, right?
Like
20,
40
25
minutes,
minutes?
something like that.
Oh, that long? Okay,
Yeah, it's
traffic's
like,
changed. Fox costs a 2-hour drive. Or Dover Fox
yeah,
costs a 2
it's
hour.
definitely a lot closer.
Yeah, and you're talking about taking kids out of school to go down and do a shoot around, and it's still the Maine Principals Association. So I assume that they govern sports. They also govern classrooms too. I suppose.
Yeah, but I feel like you make an exception for the state championship game. You get out of school early to
Well,
go shoot around.
it could have, and I think Al was, looking for reasons to losing. But the fact of the matter is Kevin Nelson had another great game. He averaged 25 points, 25 rebounds, and that's what he got in the state championship game. And
Wow.
and defensively they're pretty solid. They played a 2-3 and a 1-3 zone, a 2-3 or a 1-3-1 zone, and basically they wanted Kevin in the middle and forced him to shoot outside. And Madomic Valley did not have a very good shooting game that game. And Foxcroft scored enough points and pretty much close to its average to win.
So it's not surprising based on what you said that Scott Graffam became like one of the great coaches in the state of Maine.
Yeah,
If he had like that sort of whole blueprint thing.
Oh, he had literally, Lucas. He was going down a list of, okay, if this person does this and this person does this and this person does this and this person does this, then Madomic's going to win. And he said what they didn't. He said, and finally I said, well, why did Foxcroft win? And he had 2 words: Kevin Nelson. Because they hadn't come up against a player of that stature and that tall all season long, and he thought that was, block shots and the intimidation aspect of it contributed to Foxcroft's victory.
Interesting. And then he went on to win multiple sportsmanship awards. Scott Graffam did, much to everyone's surprise.
He was great. I mean, I talked to him. I talked to obviously to Al Barron. I was tried to connect with Art Dyer. We talked once, but Art was having some hearing problems. So I said,
Hmm.
Art, I'll send you some questions. And I emailed him a couple times with questions and didn't hear back from him. I tracked down Dean Erickson, who was 2 years later led him to a state championship, and Dean was inducted into the Maine Basketball Hall of Fame. And Dean says, to be honest with you, Dave, it's one of those games I just don't I want to forget about. So, but he had a bad shooting game, and
Yeah.
but and as did LaHaye, and um, and Kevin Nelson will readily admit this. I was talking to Kevin the other day, and he says, "No, Dave, that game could have gone either way." He
Yeah.
says, they could have won, and we wouldn't be doing this, and we wouldn't be talking, we wouldn't be doing the book, and he's right.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it was,
It's
and the fact they haven't won one since then is, pretty indicative of how significant that win was that year, and how historical it was for Foxcroft.
and Madomic hasn't won since 1980, since Art Dyer was
Exactly.
there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're
But they had a
the
good,
they're the favorites this year, or they're one of the three favorites in Class
yeah.
B. They're 17-0
Yeah.
and doing really well, and it's a really good group. And like hearing you say, they're too overconfident, I want to be like, just let's clip this out and just send it to them.
Everyone read the book and see this
Yeah,
can happen. Yeah, this
have
can
them read the
happen.
book to like, hey guys, let's not get too confident
Yeah,
here because it's been since 1980. It's enough already.
yeah. There
It's
was
time
another
to win one.
interesting. There was another interesting note about that state championship game. Skip Hansen used 4 timeouts in the last 4 minutes
Hmm.
because he was giving, for two reasons. He was trying not to let the momentum swing. And again, uh, Kevin Nelson picked up his fourth foul in the fourth quarter.
Oh,
So that, and you got to understand that whenever Kevin Nelson got 4 fouls, the anxiety level at Foxcroft, the whole thing just went up.
yeah,
So that started to sit back, and Madomic was making a comeback, and he had 4 fouls. But Kevin, and it's in the book too, Kevin had a huge blocked shot that probably saved the game in the final. I think it was in 51 seconds to go. I think it was LaHaye who missed the free throw. The first of had a 1-on-1, missed the free throw. Al Barron got the rebound, and Al was going to go up and shoot. And in a situation like that, if he had pump faked Kevin Nelson under the air, he easily would have got the fifth foul on Kevin.
yeah,
And who knows what would have happened then? It probably won the game. And Al says, I never, because I hadn't faced anybody that big, I never had to use a pump fake because I was taller than everybody else.
yeah.
So Al
Sure.
goes back up to the shot, and Nelson blocks it, and Foxcroft, David Ingraham gets the rebound, and he makes 2 free throws, and that counts for the final 2 points in the game. They win 56
Wow,
53.
that must have been
Yeah.
absolute bedlam.
Oh, it was just, I can't, again, I wish it was on TV, but when I talked to the players about it, and both of them, how tense it was. And there was one thing that was like 6 consecutive possessions that team scored. And it's, you're just the highs and lows, and every
Yeah,
whistle was so important. And it was just, and you're talking about a crowd, and Al Barron remembers coming out in the second half, and they were still putting folding chairs down around the court to try to accommodate people to getting into the building. So it was standing room only for the thing. And I mean, it was back and forth and back and forth. And I think 5 points, no more than 5 points separated the teams throughout the game. So it was
wow.
tight all the way. Yeah. And I
The
think there
fire
was,
the fire marshals were
there
more
was
lenient back then.
well, I think they were probably, yes, they probably were. I think they probably got away with it. I think there was 14 lead changes in the game.
Wow.
So they went back and forth. They were just an incredible game. Two great teams, two undefeated teams, two teams that deserved to win, and one won. So
It sounds like the sort of matchup where you're like, can we make this like a 5-game series? Can we can we can
and,
we get
and
can we
Madomic
get
wins
more of
for us.
this?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean
Madomic.
even not even a like to get a different result, but just like let's see these guys play a couple more
Yeah,
games. This is fun.
yeah, yeah. Because Kevin said he had never been in, and Kevin Nelson said he'd never been in a game with the intensity of the way that game was. Because at that time he was the main, like I said, he was the Cooper Flag of Maine at that time. He was the most sought after player in the University of Maine's history at that point. And Boston College was really hot after him that year, recruiting him. And he said there were all kinds of scouts in the stands and this and that. And his remark was, he says, "I'm just glad they came and saw a great game more than anything else."
Yeah.
And he was more, there was so much pressure for them to win because they had never been that close before, and they might never get back, and they never have.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
but it's just
they're playing. We're taping this Monday night, and they're playing right now for their tournament lives against
yeah,
Orono.
yeah,
Actually, they're
yeah.
actually playing
And,
Orono
and
right
again,
now. They were
yeah.
stalling in the second quarter, which not a great look. But so we'll see. We'll
Oh,
see.
you should see that
They're on the bubble.
they're on the bubble. Yeah, because they now that they have play-in games now, correct?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like top 10 and
It depends on the region. It depends on how many
yeah.
teams are in the region. It's two thirds. It's 2/3 of the region rounded up a spot. So if you've got 15 teams in your region, there's 10 teams that get in, and you play down to 8
Right.
for
Wow.
the playing games.
What? And you know this, Lucas. In high school basketball, and it's probably still the same way, but back then that was the number one goal. Nothing else mattered. If you got to the tournament, it was a successful season, whether you got
Yep.
over first or eighth. It was getting into the tournament, and that was what everybody get to. And Foxcroft went a period of from like 1952 to 1963, like 12 years. They didn't even make the tournament. They had no
Jeez.
basketball tradition whatsoever. Skip Hansen played at Foxcroft for 4 years, a standout basketball player at Foxcroft. They never made the tournament when he played there. So the
Really?
first time he gets to the tournament, he was as a coach. So just
Wow.
amazing. And you know about the football tradition. Foxcroft's
Sure.
always had a strong football tradition, but not
Still do.
basketball. Yeah, exactly. Same thing.
They still do.
So
How
yeah.
much do you, because you live in California now, right?
Yes.
How much do you still keep up with the main high school sports? Or is it just, well, it's probably a lot easier than it used to be.
Yeah, now I can do it. Like I'll watch, I'll watch Foxcroft games because they're always on YouTube. I'll watch football games, basketball games a little bit trickier because of different times. But
Hmm.
I'll step in. I watch your stuff and your rankings and your things,
Oh, thank you.
so I'm very much in tune to what's going on back there. But it's basically, in a way, it's sort of the same thing it was 50 years ago. Foxcroft has got a great. I think it was, one example I'll give you is I think this was one year, might have been 1967. Foxcroft wins the state championship in football, and they blow out Greenville in football. But
Wow.
during the basketball season, they
Greenville had a
twice,
football team. Jeez.
yes, Greenville had a football team. And during the basketball season, Greenville beat Foxcroft twice with essentially the same athletes.
Sure.
So it sort of comes down, I guess, to coaching more than anything else. And again, I think before Skip Hansen took over at Foxcroft, they had something like 5 coaches in 9 years.
Oh, yeah. Never good.
Preceding Skip. So it's just the instability. And they had a tremendous Dover Foxcroft has a great junior high program, but that success at the junior high level was not transferring to the high school level. When I was in school there, Dover Grammar had a 77 game winning streak,
Hmm.
and they were beating up everybody. But they weren't playing Orono, they weren't playing Skink in junior high school, they weren't playing the Bangor area schools. They were playing the local schools around Dexter, Guilford, Milo, Brownville Junction, Monson. They played Monson. I mean, Kevin Nelson grew up playing against Dover Grammar when he was in 5th and 6th grade, and they were losing by 50 or 60 points a game. And then he
Wow.
ends up going to Dover Grammar, and they didn't lose. So
There's a couple programs still that like in grade school, middle school, whatever, they're really good, and then they get to high school and it's like, what
yeah,
happened here?
thing.
It's like,
And
where
the
did
other
you
thing
go?
is, yeah, and another thing we talk about the era. I mean, small town basketball back then, Monson Academy. I think I saw there was a statistic that the Maine Basketball Hall of Fame put out. In the 1960s, there was like 36 small school, like Class S schools in the 60s and 70s in Maine. And of
Hmm.
those 36 in the 60s and 70s, only 6 exist today. So that
Wow.
just shows you how the smaller schools, and that's the erosion in the consolidation era type thing.
How big was a
It's happened.
Class S school? Like, how many students are we talking?
Oh, like I think Monson's school enrollment was around like 90 for 4
Okay.
years.
So like
Yeah.
Class D now.
Class D now, yeah, exactly, yeah. And I think I had seen something where they were talking about creating another smaller class or creating a smaller class back in Maine,
Hmm.
but it couldn't be north and south. It had to be all the combined regions
Yeah,
because they were
It's tricky because like it's an open question from year to year if those schools are going to be able to field a team. And so
yeah,
then you get like if you do north and south, then you've got like maybe 5 teams in a region one year or
yeah,
something. And so the new one of the new or the new plan is to have class D be 100 and under, and
yeah,
then and so it's not really creating a new class, it's just lowering the number and have it be a
yeah,
statewide tournament,
yeah,
which is tricky for travel, but because you've got like a team like down by New Hampshire, and then you've got like
yeah,
Ashland,
yeah.
and
No, when
and
Monson,
hopefully they don't get a prelim.
yeah, when Monson was playing, they would play against other smaller schools. In fact, there's a story I tell in the book that there was a town. I think it was Athens. Might have been Athens. They were playing at, and Steve Bray's brother Alan told me this story. So Monson goes up to play Athens, and the gymnasium is actually inside a fire station. There was no
Hey,
gymnasium; it's a fire station. So they're playing. They've got baskets inside a gymnasium inside the fire station, and it's a cement floor.
sure.
So the fire trucks are like parked in the far end of the building, about 6 feet away from the baseline and the other thing.
Of course
So
they are. Yeah.
you've got all these people at the game. And it's freezing cold outside, and inside it's just warm and moist, and the heat's inside and cold's outside. Well, the floor starts sweating. It starts getting moisture on the floor inside,
Oh.
and it's a concrete floor. So Alan Bray was telling me a story. He was a substitute in that game. There was a player named Dick Wyman, a famous basketball player, all-state player from Monson. So he's going in for a layup, and the floor is slippery. He loses his balance, and he literally slips all the way under, slides go all the way under the fire truck. He's under the fire truck after slipping off the thing there. So the referees get together, the coaches get together, they decide, listen, this is not safe, this and that.
Right. Like,
So
what's the call here?
so
Yeah.
Monson puts their starters down and puts their substitutes in because Athens didn't have a very good team. And the referees decide that because they're slipping and sliding all over the place, they're not going to call traveling at all. The whole
Okay.
game is play. So, but it was those small school
So it's like an
gymnasiums.
ice skating version of basketball,
This was
almost.
ice capades, is what it was. So, but it's just stories like that you come across in doing the research and talking about those small gymnasiums, and it was a great period of time for basketball in Maine. And you get these small schools and small towns packing up and going to the tournament. And you got schools coming from Aroostook County, coming down,
Hmm.
Van Buren's coming down, Madawaska, all those schools coming down, and they bring busloads of fans down.
Oh yeah,
Uh, so
still
it's just
do.
and then at the Bangor Auditorium, which I don't know if you had a chance
Oh
to
yeah.
see basketball outside the Bangor Auditorium. It was just a special, when the roof wasn't leaking, it was a special
Yeah.
to play
Right.
basketball. But it was, I mean, just the way it was set up with the V-shaped roof, and fans on both sides, and the smell of popcorn and hot dogs, and just a wild time at the tournaments. It's a great, you know, that's what I loved about being back in Maine, was just going to high school basketball tournaments. That's the best thing.
So you're gonna be back in Maine for to
Yes,
promote the book, and you're gonna be here like 2 days before the tournament starts. So are you
yeah,
gonna
that's.
get to the tournament,
I'm going to try to get there for on the 14th, as it starts on Valentine's Day.
the quarterfinals? Yeah.
Quarterfinal starter. I have not. I've been inside the Cross Center, but I have not been in there for a basketball game. So I'll probably stop by. I've got some media and some other things I'm going to do. We have the book launch is going to be in Dover Foxcroft at the Center Theater on the 12th, and then the 13th I'm uh, doing an interview for WABI TV's Book Corner. I'm
Hmm.
appearing at the Bangor Public Library. And then next day, I've got a book signing at Books a Million in Bangor, and then that's done, I think, at 3 o'clock, and I think the tournament starts at
Like
quarterfinal
three
start at
o'clock.
four
Yeah.
o'clock. Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
going to try
Yeah.
to scoot over there
Perfect
and
timing.
just yeah. It's Valentine's Day, and my wife's going to be with me, so I got to be careful.
Hmm. That is a little tricky. My wife has given
Yeah,
up on that. He's like, oh, the tournament
we'll
starts
find.
on Valentine's Day this year again,
I
does
really
it?
like. I really like to go there and see. Again. I've been there for the main twice for the main basketball Hall of Fame induction ceremonies.
Hmm.
So I've seen the court, but I haven't seen basketball played in it. I'd like to see what that looks like. I mean,
And
I'm partial to the Bangor Auditorium, but it's nice. It's nice, a nice looking arena from what I could see.
and I don't think the Augusta Civic Center has changed much at all
No,
since.
I was there. I actually went back there and did research when I came back for the book, and it hadn't changed at all. It's how I remember it, um,
They have Wi-Fi
and
now.
yeah, Wi-Fi.
That's the big change.
Yeah. So that was good going back there, and it just Maine holds us. I've been out in California for a long time now. Maine's I live out here, but Maine feels still my home as far as I'm concerned. I love it back there, and I still have two sisters living back there. One in Lisbon Falls, one in Dexter. So I get back there every year, every year pretty much now, every other year. But now I think this trip I'm making next week will be something like my fourth or fifth visit in the last 12 months, 13 months, something like that.
Oh,
So,
there you go.
but I haven't
See,
been back in Maine in a winter. So
that's
this will
the
be
winter.
nice.
It's been a pretty mild winter, but I don't know. If
Yeah.
you're used to California now, you'll be like, "What is this? This is
Well, I just saw the
terrible."
weather forecast. As long as I'm fine with it. But I saw the weather. I mean, the coldest it gets where I live, it's probably, it might get down in the 30s. And I was looking at the weather forecast in Bangor, and it's going to be, I think the low is like 0 or 1 degree the time I'm back there. So
Yeah,
uh,
I was
I'll bring
supposed
my
to run
long.
a I was supposed to run a race the other day, and it was like -4 when the race was going to start, and I'm like, "No, that's not. We're not doing that. I don't need to do that."
Go to the mall and walk around.
Yeah. All right, let me throw the picture of the book up here again. So tell people how they can get the book. They can pre-order it, right?
You can pre-order probably the easiest way right now to pre-order because it's not actually going to be out until the 18th. It won't be in
Yeah.
stores to be sold until the 18th. So the easiest thing to do is probably go on the book website, which is www the last one out of town.com. TheLastOneOutofTown. The last one out of town.com. And there's four tabs as you go on the main page that you can order it through Amazon, through Barnes and Noble, through Books a Million and bookshop.com. That's the best way. The Down East Books is the one that's publishing it. They're having some issues with their website right now, so that's probably just the easiest thing to do is to go to the book site and www.thelast1outoftown.com and order it there. So,
And
but
if
it'll be in bookstores in I think the 18th. So,
do you know which bookstores it's going to be in locally?
I know in Bangor, I know it's going to be at the Briars Patch and Books a Million. I'm not sure about the other stores right now. I, it'll be you can like I said, the easiest way you can probably just go online and look for it and find it and order it that way. Would
Right.
be the easiest to do. So
Right. But the people they like to get the physical book and go to the bookstore or something. Especially the
yeah,
older
exactly.
crowd. The people who were at
Yeah,
the game are maybe more likely to find the physical copy at a store.
I just hope Lucas. I just hope that the readers of this book, if you decide to read it, you have as much fun or it has as much impact on you reading it as it did on me writing and researching it. Because I mean, it's sort of life altering in a degree because it took me back to a period of time and was really good times and reconnected me with a lot of friends and family members and it's just and I don't think it's mostly a collection of small humorous anecdotes and things of that nature. There's some sad stories in there. The Monson
Hmm.
Academy story, Monson Academy closing story is sort of sad. And there's one episode where a couple of co-captains get kicked off the team and the impact that had off on them. But it's a bunch, dozens of small little stories and funny little stories of how it came from, because you can't tell the story of Foxcroft Academy without telling the story of Monson Academy
Right.
and how it morphed into the state championship. And because they don't win the state championship without that consolidation and without Kevin Nelson.
And it says on the website you interviewed like 50, 60 people, and it sounds like it's a
Yeah,
lot of like the names that we recognize still, like Skip
that's
Hansen
the
and
same. Yeah,
Grapham and people
exactly.
like that.
Exactly. And I could have, to be quite honest with you, I probably could have interviewed another 50 to 60. It was that many. But at some point, you're going to, okay, I've got enough information. I need to start writing the book, to get it
That's
out.
the
And my,
trap
my
of
main,
writing.
yeah, exactly. So, but I could have talked to a lot more people and I talked to Eben DeWitt, who was 92, 93 years old. He was the coach at Dover Grammar School that had that 77 game winning streak, and why it didn't work at Foxcroft Academy, but it worked at Dover Grammar. I got emails to George Hale and talked to him. Brian Butterfield I tracked down and had a wonderful conversation with Butter because he played in Orono
Hmm.
during that period of time. And,
Had a
Skip
pretty good
Chappelle writes
career for himself.
a really good career, and obviously was the third base coach for the Red Sox when they won the World Series too. And I talked. Skip Chappelle wrote the foreword for the book, and Skip was wonderful, and it was great working with him on this book here. And I'm hoping that he's going to be able to make it to launch, or hopefully at least I'll see him at the Bangor Public Library when we do the event there on the 13th. But just so many people contributed to it, and everyone's looking at me and say, "Hey, it's your book," and it's not my book; it's our book. It's our memories. It's everybody's memories. But the foundation of it is my memories, but it's me asking questions of other people's memories and them giving me memories, and all of a sudden I'm going down rabbit holes left and right, tracking down stories I hadn't heard before that are
Yeah.
hilarious. It's like, God, it was just a wonderful, wonderful project that came together, and like I said, I hope it has as much impact on the people who read the book as it has on me in researching and writing it.
I mean, you're just the kid who's at the grocery store asking
Yeah,
questions about who's going to the game.
19 years old. Yeah, 19 years old. Do you want me to go to the game? And she says yes. So, and again, if that doesn't, what if, and I look at
That's
it,
your
what
sliding
if,
doors moment.
exactly. Well, it is. It's almost like, what if Foxcroft didn't have a good team that year? I wouldn't have gone to the game. I wouldn't have asked her. They had
Hmm.
a good team. I asked the question, and I do all this. And if I don't do that, I'm not going to be a sports writer, and I'm not going to be in California.
Right.
I'm not going to write this book. That's just that team, that game, and that team changed my life, changed the course of my career, and changed the course of my life. So I owe a lot to that team.
Yeah. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm sure my father's going to read it like 3 times because that's his era, and it's you might be shocked to believe that it's a basketball family over here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds very very cool.
Yeah. You'll have fun with it. It's and that's sort of the way I was. It's a fun book. It's a fun book, and it's a nostalgic book for people my age. It's all about nostalgia for someone who's a teenager now, or a high school or young adult right now. It's a history book, is what it is. This is the way basketball was played back there, and how important it was back there, and what it meant when you had a winning basketball team in your town, winning high school basketball team in your town. Everybody went crazy.
They
There
still
was
do.
the Yeah, they still do. Yeah, and there was a game in my that first year. Foxcroft played Orono, and Orono came in with a 33 game winning streak,
Wow.
and Foxcroft beat him in that gym that night. And I think you've been in the Foxcroft Academy gymnasium. It probably seats
I don't know if I
nine
have.
or maybe 900 to 1,000 people. There
Okay.
had to be at least 1,200 that night. And there's a photo on the book website. There's a photo of that game taken from across the way, and they were people that were lined up. They were standing on the baseline,
Hmm.
like 3 or 4 deep, and they were sitting next to the basketball things. They were on the stage. It had to be at least 1,200 to maybe 1,500. Talk about fire marshals looking the other way. That was that night was one of those situations, and it was a great basketball game that night. Foxcroft ends up winning the game, but they were down 19-4 in the first quarter and came back to win it. And the place was just rocking, and just a wonderful memory for everyone back then.
Well, I mean, last year for Madomic Oceanside, they had like 1,500 people. They had to shut the doors during the
Yeah,
girls' game.
good,
It was
good.
awesome. It was a great
Yeah,
atmosphere. Best
yeah,
$4 you can spend.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I don't even know what the price was there. Probably 75 cents to get in.
Probably,
But
yeah, probably 2 bits.
yeah, well, it was expensive. Again, back in '75, there was a gas. They talk about gas, the price of gasoline then.
Hmm.
They had a problem with gasoline consumption back then. And I remember in
Oh,
Dover,
sure.
73, 74, there were cars lined up on Main Street trying to get to the thing because they were doing an odd and even license plate rationing. If you had an odd plate, you came on one day. If you had an even numbered plate, you
Wow.
came on another day, and they had to ration gasoline. And these
That's
people are
crazy.
just so excited. They're driving to Bangor and back, and that's pretty expensive. Drive to
Adds
Bangor
up.
and over, and gas is that way. So
All right. Let
All
me
time.
we'll plug the book one more time. The book is The Last One Out of Town. Turn Out the Lights. It looks awesome. You can buy it pretty much a bunch of places online. Buy it in Bangor
And
bookstores,
Amazon, you could find it. Everybody goes
Amazon.
on Amazon.
It's on my Amazon thing, my
Yeah.
thing of I need to buy this at some point.
Yeah.
So I'm looking
Well,
forward to mine coming in.
thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And again, I hope people. This is sort of the way I sort of romanticize this as the movie version of Hoosiers from Maine's
Yep,
Hoosiers type
sure.
thing. And Hoosiers is my favorite movie of all time, and it's sort of that
It's
had
a great
that
one.
sort of yeah. It's a good movie, and I just hope people will enjoy this book.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me.
Lucas, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Okay, that's the show. Yeah, season's winding down. We got one more day of games on Friday, and then we got prelims, and then we got the tournament. We made it. It's gonna be awesome, and have a bunch of stuff coming up for that. So stick around. If you haven't subscribed to the site yet, you should do that. And I think there's gonna be a cool announcement coming up. Might know more tomorrow. We'll see. Already leaking a little bit, so you might have maybe heard an inkling of it, but it's going to be very cool. And yeah, so stay tuned and do all the things. So, this has been a production of MaineBasketballRankings.com, your source for the most comprehensive coverage of Maine high school basketball from Ashland to York and everywhere in between. This podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts and a bunch of places you don't. If you enjoyed this, please leave a nice review because it really does help out with the algorithms. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Thanks for listening.